Let's move on to the next part of the chapter that we'll be dealing with the animal tissue. We have had a look at plant tissues in detail. Let's talk about what the various kind of animal tissues, what structure they form in animal body, and what is the particular function of these particular kind of tissues. Let's find out. First of all, let's have a simple classification. Alright, on the basis of the functions they perform, animal tissues can be divided into the following types. Number one is the epithelial tissue. Okay, you can also see here in the diagram. Number two is the connective tissue. Alright, number three is the muscular tissue, and number four is the nervous tissue. So, by its name, epithelial tissue, let's take a guess by the name of this tissue. Epithelial tissue that must have some function related to the surface of the animal body. Connective tissue, it must connect something, right? That connection could be what? From bone to our muscles, from or between muscles to muscles, or between cells to cells. So the basic function of this tissue is that they are covering up the entire, you can say, the entire space of a person, of a body, or even of an animal. All right. Whereas the muscular tissue, they are involved in that muscular, say, contraction or stretching, in which we have some say in it voluntarily, or there are some muscular tissues which we'll be learning, for example the cardiac tissues, in which we don't have any say. They are involuntary in nature, but they perform very vital function in our bodies. Then you have the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue, what name comes up when you think of nervous tissue? You obviously, one most important, and on top of my head also, if you also give it a thing, and if you also look at the picture over here, nerve cells, right? And where are the nerve cells located? They have something to do with brain, right? They have something to do with spinal cord. So even if you have a simple, even if you just stay at the screen, and you look at the names of the kind of tissues that there are, even all those names that we had a chance to look at in the plant section. All right, just pause for a second, think about the name, and think about that what area of the particular plant body or animal body that tissue may be constituting, where it is located, and from that you may at least get a hint, or you may at least remember the gist that yes, this is where this tissue is located, and if this is where the tissue is located, so it must perform this kind of functions. For example, a connective tissue must connect, or it must form, or if it must occupy most of the spaces in the animal body, whereas the epithelial tissue, it must perform some surface functions. All right, some functions such as protection, secretion, etc. So this is what we'll be learning in the animal tissue part. Let's have a look at the first category, that is the epithelial tissue. The covering or protective tissues in the animal body, the epithelial tissues. Epithelium covers most organs and cavities within the body. Cavities, if you may remember, they are openings, right? Cavities are openings. So all those orifices, if I may use the word, all those orifices or those places that are present at some openings, okay, some or some even outermost layer, okay, those are the areas where you will get the epithelial tissue. It also forms a barrier to keep different body systems separate. Okay, so not just at the outermost layer of the surface of the skin, but also to divide the different body systems, even if it is internally. Epithelial tissue cells are tightly packed and form a continuous sheath. Why tightly packed? Because they are forming the outermost layer, so they have to be very protective, or they have to form a barrier sort of structure in order to protect be it the inside body systems or the outside cells. They have only a small amount of cementing material between them and almost no intercellular spaces, since they are tightly packed and since they form a continuous sheath. Epithelial tissue, depending on the shape and function, we have the squamous epithelium. Okay, we also have another type of squamous epithelium tissue, which we call as stratified squamous epithelium. The simple, only the cells which we just, or the tissues which we just name as squamous tissue. We can also call this as simple squamous epithelium, whereas there is one another kind of squamous epithelium tissue which we call as stratified squamous epithelium. Then there is the columnar or the ciliated epithelial tissue, and lastly we have the cuboidal epithelial tissue. So these types of tissues, they are formed at the surface, forming a protective barrier, or they divide distinct body systems, and depending upon where they are located, depending on what function they have, what shape they have, we have four kinds of epithelial tissue. Let's have a look at the squamous epithelium first. Simple squamous epithelial cells are extremely thin and flat, and they form a delicate lining just like a sheet. And since it has no complex structure, so we have a simple name for it, simple squamous epithelium. The esophagus, that is your food pipe, and the lining of the mouth are also covered with squamous epithelium. So if you get a question that what kind of cells surround the esophagus, or what are the kind of cells that are present at the lining of your mouth, you will give the answer simple squamous epithelium. The skin, which protects the body, is also made up of squamous epithelium, since skin is that outermost layer that forms a barrier of our whole body. All right. Skin epithelial cells are arranged in many layers to prevent wear and tear. Okay, so skin, since it's the most outermost covering of our body, all right, so just a thin layer of sheet would not be enough. So there are squamous epithelial cells, they are stacked upon each other layer after layer, all right. There is a whole bunch of layer, and because owing to its layered structure, we have given this the name of stratified squamous epithelium. So they are basically just squamous epithelial cells which are arranged in many layers to prevent wear and tear. That means their single function is of protection, their single function is of a barrier. So they may look, the uppermost section, it may look like a sheet, but when you go inside it, you find that, oh, there are several layers attached, there are several layers stacked on top of one another, and that is because of the stratified squamous epithelium. Owing to its name is owing to the arrangement of the pattern of layers that we find in this sort of tissue. Now let's have a look at the columnar epithelium, which we also call the ciliated epithelium. So wherever absorption and secretion occur, as in the inner lining of the intestine, because in intestines are those places in your digestive system where specific nutrients are absorbed, right? Some secretion is also given out, but mainly all the important nutrients, they are absorbed in the small intestine of your digestive system. So all those places where absorption and secretion occur, there will be the cells, tall epithelial cells of columnar in nature, they will be present there. This columnar meaning pillar-like epithelium, it facilitates the movement across the epithelial barrier. All right. So since it's tall in nature, right? So the transfer of material is easy from one epithelial cell to another. In the respiratory tract also, since in the respiratory tract also there is absorption of gases, all right, and secretion. So there also columnar epithelial cell or tissue also. In the respiratory tract, these have some special projections, hair-like projections, cilia, which is known as cilia. They are present on the outer surfaces of these epithelial cells. So in the columnar epithelium, the respiratory tract, you have specific hair-like structure, just like this diagram over here, that is known as cilia. All right. So this cilia, this hair-like structure, it helps in the easy transfer of secretion or easy, absorption of some sort of other secretion that may be, produced by other cells. All right. Also, their movement pushes the mucus forward to clear it. So whatever mucus is there, they go through this columnar cell, they go through this basal gangrenous cytoplasm, and they come out of these epithelial cells through cilia. So cilia helps in those areas where some absorption, some secretion is taking place, and this type of epithelium is the ciliated columnar epithelium. Let's have a look at the last sort of epithelial cells. They are the cuboidal epithelium cells. Cuboidal epithelium with cube-shaped cells. Since its name only suggests you that the shape, the structure of the cells are cube-shaped. They form the lining of kidney tubules. Like I had told you that epithelium cells, they also divide themselves between the internal body organs, right? So since they are dividing between the internal body organs, so they must be present at the outer covering of some internal organs. Think of it like that. So if there is this bean shaped kidney, so there must be some outer layer that is covering these kidney organs, right? So these cube-shaped epithelial cells, cuboidal epithelium cells, they form the lining of kidney tubules. So we have the tubules of the kidney, so they form the lining of this kidney tubule. All right. I'm sorry, not the outer covering of the kidney, but rather of the kidney tubules. Okay, and also the ducts of salivary glands. All right. So the important thing to remember here that they are not covering the organ itself, but they are rather covering the ducts, all right, or the tubes that projecting out of the organs. So these tubes, they must have more surface area, right? So instead of covering the organs, they are covering the ducts or the tubes that are projecting out of those organs. So ducts of salivary glands, lining of the kidney tubules, and by doing that, they are providing mechanical support to the organs of such a, to the organs such as the kidney and such as the salivary glands. Epithelial cells, they often require additional specialization as gland cells, which can secrete substances at the epithelial level. Owing to this, specific function, they are also known as glandular epithelium. So some epithelial cells, not all cuboidal epithelial cells, but some cuboidal epithelial cells, they can acquire the additional function, the additional specialization of secreting substances. And since the organs that secrete substances, they are known as glands, right? Since they are secreting substances, they are also known as glandular epithelium, and sometimes a portion of the epithelial tissue folds inward and a multicellular gland is formed. So when these cuboidal epithelium cells, they also perform the function of secretion. And how do they perform this function of secretion? By being folded inwards. All right. So if this is a cross-sectional view, and if this cell is, if this group of cells is somehow folding itself inwards, and if it's somehow acquiring that ability to secrete some secretions, then we will call it as glandular epithelium. Okay, so a question at the end of this part, we have to identify the tissues and the classification. So this is what does this group of tissue look like to you? Okay, let's see. We have cells. These are loosely spaced. Why? Because we have a lot of intercellular spaces between the cells. You can see over here, right? A lot of intercellular spaces. Also, this is green in color. Okay, so what are those cells called, which are thin walled, we have loosely packed, lots of spaces between them, and green in color? This is the chlorenchyma. This is the special kind of chlorenchyma. This is the special kind of parenchymatic cells that are responsible for photosynthesis as well as for the storage of food. So chlorenchyma, they perform the function of the simple parenchymatic cells, that is, they store tissue. Also, since they are green in color, they are green in color because of that chlorophyll. They are green in color because of this green pigment chlorophyll, which helps in photosynthesis. Second tissue, it looks like a human tissue, it looks like an animal tissue, right? And it is tall, it is tubular, and it is very closely packed. So what does this look like to you? This is an epithelial cell, all right? And since it is, it is tall, it is columnar in shape. So it is columnar epithelium cells, okay? Why did I say that this is an animal tissue? I said this because of this pinkish hue. right? So you know that all animal cells, they are living in nature. And what constitutes a living cell? A living cell has some liquid, some fluid that is running all inside that living system, right? For example, there is some liquid flowing inside my veins, inside your veins. What is that? That is blood. And what is the color of blood? Color of blood is red, and owing to its color, all the specific types of cells that may be seen under a microscope, if we are able to say cut a layer of, say, my skin over here, and if I am to observe the insides of it under a microscope, I'll be viewing at some cells which have this pinkish hue. All right, that is because of the blood. So that is how I came to know that this must be a living animal tissue. All right. Also over here, if this is the third one, the fourth one over here, also this is the muscular tissue. This is the human tissue. We'll be learning about it in the next part. Third one is the xylem. This is the xylem because, as you can see in the picture, it is it is helping the transportation of water, and the direction is only upwards. All right, there is only one direction. All right, since roots, they absorb water and they distribute water to all the plant body. So since that is happening from the downward direction, so the direction of the transportation of water is unidirectional. Whereas over here in the fifth one, this must be the phloem cells. Okay, this must be the phloem cells. Why? Because there is the transportation of food is happening in both the directions over here. Also, there is perforation. All right, sieve tubes. If you remember, there is perforation over here. In the sixth one, green again. So we have this sclerenchymatic tissue. Why? Because we know that the cell walls of sclerenchyma, they're pretty thick, and if you see over here, this green thick substance, this is the lignin, cement-like chemical substance that gives the sclerenchymatous cell wall that thickened structure. All right, so these are the different tissues and these are the classifications. Let's move on to the second part of animal tissue. In this part, we'll be learning about the connective tissue. We'll be learning what the different types of connective tissue, what structure they're made up of, and what different functions they perform. So let's have a look. Connective tissue, the cell's connective tissues, they are loosely spaced and embedded in an intercellular matrix. So all the connective tissue that we have, they are loosely spaced. They have a lot of spaces and they are flowing, they are intermeshed, they are embedded in some liquid. And what do we call this liquid? This liquid is basically fluid like, all right, it may be thick, but it's a fluid like matrix, all right, in which the cells, the connective tissue cells, they are embedded. If this is the nucleus and if this is the cell wall and other components of the cell, all right. So this is how connective tissues are embedded. The matrix, it may be jelly-like, fluid, dense or rigid. So depending upon what material is there and what kind of cells are embedded, the texture of the fluid matrix changes. Nature of matrix differs in concordance with the function of the particular connective tissue. Alright, let us look at the different types of connective tissue. First of all, we have blood. Blood is the, it's present in a profuse amount in our body, because even if you have a small cut on the surface of your skin, blood oozes out immediately, right? So blood is a fluid or the liquid. Basically, it's a matrix called, that matrix is called plasma. So the liquid part of the blood is called the plasma, and the cells, the blood cells, they are suspended in that liquid matrix. So what are the blood cells? They are the RBCs, they are the WBCs, and they are platelets. That means they are red blood cells, there are white blood cells, and then there are platelets. They are suspended, embedded inside this matrix. Plasma or the matrix, it also contains proteins, salts and hormones. Blood flows and transports gases, digested food, hormones, and waste materials to different parts of the body. So the function of blood is to basically to flow all around the body, and while flowing, it transports all the food, it transports the hormones, also waste, also digested food. So all those small secretions or all those small absorptions that are needed to be done throughout the body, that is performed via blood. The second connective tissue is the bone, is another example. It forms the framework that supports the body, that solid skeleton, all right, that you have all the major joints of your body. It also anchors the muscles and supports the main organs of the body. So it basically provides a structural, mechanical, skeletal support. All right, it's strong and it's a non-flexible tissue. It's a connective tissue, but it's a non-flexible tissue. It cannot be bended. It can be only, it can break, but it cannot be bended. Bone cells, they are embedded in a hard matrix that is composed of calcium and phosphorus compounds. So bone cells, the types of bone cells, there are osteoblast, there is osteoclast, there is osteocyte, and there is osteogenic cell. And the matrix, the liquid fluid that bone cells, they are suspended, they are composed of calcium and phosphorus compounds, and it is a hard one. The matrix is the hard one. In that matrix, we also have this sort of arrangement that we call the Haversian canal. This arrangement helps in the transfer of important cells such as osteocytes, and it also forms a network where the blood vessels and all, they are interconnected. All right, so the function of this Haversian canal is where the blood vessels and all the important nerves, all the important secretions, they are interconnected to each other. And also, if you can see this concentric circle, these in between this matrix and these circles are basically formed by the osteocytes. Two bones can be connected to each other by another type of connective tissue, that is the ligament. So bone to bone is itself a connective tissue, but if we want to form a bone to bone connection, we have another connective tissue for it, and that is the ligament. This ligament tissue is very elastic and it has considerable strength because it is after all connecting very two solid bones. Ligaments contain very little matrix because it has to stretch and basically hold together two bones in places. So its matrix has a very, its matrix is very less in amount. Tendons connect bones to muscles, and another type of connective tissue, tendons are fibrous tissue with great strength but limited flexibility. So bone to bone connection is known as ligament, whereas bone to muscle connection, bone is also connected to muscle. That is why that muscle helps in the easy up and downward movement of the bone. All right, so that connective tissue that connects the bone with the muscle is tendon. Tendon is itself a connective tissue, so is ligament. Tendons, they are fibrous tissue, they're made of fibers, they have great strength, but they are limited in flexibility. Another type of connective tissue is the cartilage, and cartilage is very widely distributed in our body, and they are very widely spaced also. All right, the solid matrix of cartilage, they are composed of proteins and sugars. While bones had calcium and phosphorus, cartilage has proteins and sugars. Cartilage smoothens bone surfaces at joints and is also present in the nose, in the ear, in the trachea, and in the larynx. All right, so near respiratory organs, near our sense organs, also at the joint surfaces of bone, so that it can be smoothened. There is the presence of cartilage, and cartilage is rich in proteins and sugar. Then we have the areolar tissue. It's another kind of connective tissue that is present between the skin and muscles. So if you have the outermost layer of epithelial cells, okay, and then you have various muscles, all right, so that tissue that connects these epithelial cells to the muscular cells, okay, so these cells are your areolar tissue. These cells are your areolar tissue. They are also found around blood vessels and nerves, and in bone marrow. So if you can see in this diagram over here, these red blood capillaries. So around the blood vessels, around the nerves, there is certain types of tissue that connect one vessel to say the other, or even the bone marrow. They're connecting basically one part of the tissue to another. All right, and that itself is known as the connective tissue. It fills the space inside the organs, it supports internal organs, and helps in the repair of tissues. It helps in the repair of tissues. Why? Since it is easily connected to two parts of a system. All right, so for example, blood vessels is connected between two parts, or say in the bone marrow, it's connecting things. All right, so it easily helps in the repair in case certain injury happens to that organ. All right, another type of connective tissue is the muscular tissue. Please don't confuse it with the muscle tissues that we will be learning in the next part of this chapter. This muscular tissue is a connective tissue, okay, and it is responsible for all those involuntary movements that we are having inside the alimentary canal. The movement of food in the alimentary canal, or even the contraction and relaxation of blood vessels, they are involuntary movements. That is, we do not do this willingly. We do not exert some pressure or some force to do it. It is happening within our body on itself, by itself, right? We cannot really start them, or we cannot really stop them simply by wanting to do so. So smooth muscles or involuntary muscles, they control such involuntary movements, and they are found in the iris of the eye, in ureters, that is in the urinary bladder, and in the bronchi of the lungs. So whatever is happening inside your respiratory system, inside your urinary glands, and the eye movements, you do not really exert some pressure around it. It happens on its own. All right, it happens with the help of these muscular connective tissue. These cells are long, as you can see here in this diagram. They have pointed ends, they are tapering, they are spindle shaped. Alright, tapering means they are pointed both at the beginning and say at the end. So it is sort of spindle shaped, spindle that that needle sort of shape. Alright, so it has pointed ends, it is spindle shaped, and it is uninucleate, means it has only one nucleus. As you can see in this diagram over here, it has a single nucleus, and it has small fibers that are surrounding these nucleus, which are known as the myofibrils. All right. Let us talk about adipose tissue, and I think this would be the last connective tissue. Fat storing adipose tissue is found below the skin and between internal organs. The cells of these tissues are filled with fat globules. Storage of fats lets it act as an insulator. All right. Let's finish the chapter by talking about the animal tissue, the third part that will be constituting the muscular tissue and the nervous tissue. Let's start by learning about the muscular tissue. Muscular tissue consists of elongated cells, also called muscle fibers, and these muscle fibers, they help in the movement of a body. Now when you curl up your hand like this, there is certain contraction of the muscles, and when you unbend your arm like this, there is a relaxation of muscles. And this contraction and relaxation of muscles, it happens via a specific protein which we call as the contractile proteins. Owing to this contractile movement, we are able to move around here and there, because these muscles, they basically surround the bones, and owing to that muscle to bone connection, we are able to move from one place to another. Striated muscles present in our limbs move when we want them to and stop when we decide. These muscles are known as voluntary muscles, and they are also known as skeletal muscles, since they help in the body movement and they are mostly attached to the bones. The basic specific feature of striated muscle is that when observed under the microscope, they have alternate light and band that surround them. You can see here in this diagram, there is this thin light band, then there's a darker portion, there is the light band, then there is a darker portion. All right, so this alternate light and dark band is how you can differentiate striated muscle. All right, also one cell has more than one nucleus, then that is, it is multinuclei. So the structure of striated muscle is that it is long, it is cylindrical, it has a cylinder like long tubular shape. all right? It is unbranched, okay? That means one cell only has one tubular structure, and it is multinucleate, that is, it has more than one nucleus, and then of course you have the alternate light and dark band that is observed in the striated muscle, okay? Then you have the cardiac muscle. The reason why we learned about whether the striated muscle are branched or not is because cardiac muscles, they are branched. Cardiac muscles, they are found around the heart. They show rhythmic contraction and relaxation throughout life. Throughout life, because from the moment when we are born to the moment that we'll die, the heart continuously pumps blood. That is how we are able to survive. All right. So this continuous pumping of blood, it happens through a movement, and that movement is contraction and relaxation of muscles. These muscles are the cardiac muscles, and they are involuntary because we do not need to exert extra force or extra pressure in order for those muscles to function, but they happen on their own. So these cardiac muscles, they're also cylindrical in shape, also tubular, but they are branched and they are uninucleate. That means one cell would have one nucleus, and they are branched, that is, they almost there is this tapering sort of connection, from one cell with the another. Let's learn about nervous tissue. The brain, spinal cord, and nerves, these are all composed of the nervous tissue. Alright, the cells of this tissue are called the nerve cells or the neurons. A neuron consists of a cell body with a nucleus and cytoplasm, from which thin, long, thin-like hairs, they arise. Alright, this will be clear mostly in this slide. You can see over here, this is this whole structure. This is one nerve cell. One nerve cell has one head. Okay, this is basically your this is basically your cell body. Okay, there is the nucleus. Then out of this cell body you have hair-like projections that are coming out, hair-like or almost root-like, if you may observe, because they are branching and sub-branching. All right, these are known as dendrites, and one particular projection, if you look at one particular projection, we will call it dendron. So the singular is dendron, but the plural is the dendrites. Then you have this nucleus in the cell body. Okay, then you have along this this stem sort of structure, we have this sheath around it. These are the myelin sheath. Okay, and towards the end we have another tapering root-like structure. Okay, towards the end we have the these, at the tip of these tapering ends is where chemical transmission occurs. All right, and that is why when you encounter a stimulus, the message reaches, it reaches from the dendrites, goes through the cell body, travels through all these myelin sheath towards the body, and then it leaves through these end like root-like tapering structure where some chemical transmission occurs, and you get that signal in your brain that, oh, you're supposed to talk, or oh, you're supposed to move your hand, etc. So nerve impulses allow us to move our muscles when we want to. Okay, the functional combination of nerve and muscle tissue is fundamental to most animals, because this combination enables animal to move rapidly in response to stimuli. All these actions, it happens in a fraction of a second. We are learning here, okay, diagrammatically it may appear that, oh, it's such a long and tedious process. But no, it happens in a fraction of a second. In a fraction of a second, when you receive a stimulus, it goes inside your brain, that chemical transmission occurs, and you get that, outward response that yes, you have to talk, or yes, you have to move. All right. Another diagram of the neuron will be much clearer over here, because you see this cell body, the portion of the dendrite plus the cell body is known as the axon. Okay, then you have the myelin sheath. All right, that's the tapering end of the axon. Okay, and two myelin sheaths, they're connected by some nodes. This is the node of Ranvier, and inside the sheath is the covering, right? So inside this sheath there is a Schwann cell. Okay, and then this axon, this tapering stem-like structure, is terminating here where you some chemical transmission may occur. So this is known as the axon terminal. All this The structure of a neuron, if you may look at it, if you may observe it, you will find that it almost, it looks like a tiny plant, right? It has roots like structure coming out of, at the tip, also nearing the end, and then you have cells surrounding all over it. Then you have also supply of what? Supply of stimulus, supply of action. All right, so usually each neuron has a single long part called the axon and many short branched parts called the dendrites. An individual nerve cell may be up to 1 meter long. Imagine how many nerve cells may be, stacked inside our body, inside our brain, inside a spinal cord. Many nerve fibers, they bound together by connective tissue, make up one nerve. All right, and the interesting thing about nerve cells is that they do not they there are no new nerve cells forming in our body. That means all the nerve cells, some of them, they may wither and die away, but there are no new cells. There are no new nerve cells formed in our body. That is why it's very important to take care of our brain, to take care of mental health, and it's very important to give your spinal cord some rest, to give your basically your nervous system some rest. Question: name the tissue responsible for the movement in our body. If you may remember, muscular tissue is very important. Why? Because muscular tissue, it surrounds our bones. It is attached to the bones, and since it is attached to the bones, it helps in the contraction and relaxation. So we are able to move owing to the muscular tissue. What does a neuron look like? We just had a look at the structure of a neuron. Neuron looks like a tiny plant-like structure. It has hair, then it has, a cell body, then it has a long axon. All right, I'm drawing a very rough diagram over here. Please excuse my drawing. And this axon ends in another tapering ends, which we know as the axon terminals. All right. Give 3 features of cardiac muscles. Now we know that cardiac muscles, they are involuntary muscles because we do not have to exert a pressure in order for them to work. It happens on its own, by its own. Okay. Another feature is that cardiac muscles, they are uninucleate. Okay, they have only one nucleus and they are branched. Okay. There is a continuous contraction and relaxation that is occurring, and this contraction and relaxation, this happens throughout the life. We do not need to give it a command, it happens on its own. And of course, cardiac muscles, they pump blood. So like I've given you another extra feature, that cardiac muscles, they help in the pumping of blood. Owing to the contraction and relaxation of these muscles, the heart is able to pump blood. What are the functions of areolar tissue? Areolar tissue, if you may remember, they form the connecting juncture between, say, blood vessels, say, nerves, or also between organs. All right, so they are the connecting juncture between these organs, and because they're the connecting juncture, they help in the case of repair of these tissues. All right, they help in the case of repair of these tissues, and they also provide, protection, and they also provide connection. Okay, there is protection and also there is connection. All right,